So, have you ever stopped to think about what history really is? I mean, it's so much more than just a bunch of old stories. Today, we're going to dive into what history is all about and why it's honestly one of the most powerful tools we have for figuring out our world right now and for building a better future. Let's kick things off with this quote from George Santayana. It just hits the nail on the head. Those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. This perfectly sets the stage, right? It tells us that history isn't some dusty old book on a shelf. No, it's vital. It's a warning for sure, but it's also a promise that we can learn and do better. All right, so let's get right into that first big idea. History isn't just about looking back at what happened, it's our roadmap for what's coming next. So, how exactly does the past shape our future? Well, think of it like this. History is a map of this wild, tricky landscape that people have already journeyed through. It's our guide, showing us the paths that led to amazing things, but it also puts up these huge warning signs around the pits that led to disaster. It helps us understand how the world operated way back when, so we can finally make sense of why it works the way it does now. It's all about connecting the dots. Okay, so we get why it matters, but what are we even talking about when we say the word history? Because trust me, the real definition is way more exciting than just memorizing a list of names and dates for a test. So, the formal definition calls history a unique recording or study of the past. But here's the part that really matters. It focuses on people and events. That's it, that's the whole game. At its heart, history is the epic story of the human experience. And this is where it gets really cool. The original Greek word for history, historia, doesn't just mean the past. It actually means inquiry or knowledge from investigation. So you see, history was never meant to be about just memorizing stuff. It's about being a detective, actively searching for clues and figuring out what really happened. So the big takeaway here is this. We have got to throw out that old idea of history being a boring, dusty timeline. It's not. It's a living, breathing exploration of the human story, full of twists and turns, triumphs, and absolute heartbreaks. All right, so if a historian is basically a detective for the past, what's in their toolkit? I mean, how do they actually go about solving these mysteries? Well, it really boils down to a pretty clear three-step process. First, you got to find your clues. Then, you have to put them in the right order. And finally, you figure out the story they're trying to tell you. The why behind it all. These clues, or what historians call sources, are pretty much everything people left behind. We're talking official documents, personal letters, stories passed down from one generation to the next, even things like paintings or a simple piece of pottery. All of it tells us so much about how people lived, what they cared about, and what made them tick. Okay, so once you've got all your clues, the next step is building a chronology, and this is absolutely fundamental. You have to put the events in the right order to see how one thing led to another. Without that, you've just got a jumbled mess of facts with no story. It wouldn't make any sense. And that leads us to the final and maybe the most important step, finding the cause and effect. This is where you go from just knowing what happened to understanding why it happened. What drove people to do what they did? What were the consequences? This is where the real learning, the real understanding actually begins. So why go through all this trouble? What's the big payoff for learning to think like a historian? Well, it turns out you get some seriously useful mental superpowers. The biggest one is this. History trains your mind to think critically. I mean, we are drowning in information these days, right? The ability to tell the difference between a solid fact and someone's opinion or their hidden bias is probably one of the most important skills you can have. History forces you to look at the evidence and not just take things at face value. But it goes even deeper than that. History builds empathy. When you really study the lives of people from different times and places, you're forced to see the world through their eyes. You start to understand their struggles, their hopes, and you realize that even with all the time and distance between us, we're all connected by this common human bond. And that kind of understanding, that's the foundation for tolerance and respect in our own world today. And hey, let's not forget, history is just flat out fascinating. This isn't some made-up story. It's the ultimate drama, packed with real heroes, real villains, incredible action, and a ton of emotion. Why? Because it's our story. It's the story of life itself. So let's see how all this works in the real world. Let's take that historian's toolkit we just talked about, examining clues, finding the why, and use it on a real question, pulled straight from these notes. Here it is, a simple question from a homework page. Who are the Maroons? This is the perfect starting point for a historical investigation. Who were they? What's their story? And here's our first clue, right from the source. The Maroons are the descendants of enslaved Africans who escaped and formed their own communities. Wow. Right there, that single sentence just cracks open this massive, powerful story of resistance, of survival, and of the fight for freedom. This is what history does. It gives a voice to incredible human stories.